I got to photograph one of the most haunted places in Ontario, Canada, Century Manor. For this video, I'm going to be talking about the history of the building, what they're planning to do with it, and then on top of that, I'm going to be sharing my photos along the way. It was built in 1876, used to treat the insane, but became housing for the criminally insane. The way they treated the patients were inhumane. A lot of people actually came and visit the manor, but they were visiting for entertainment purposes, and they would sit there and watch the patients. And when the patients wouldn't do anything entertaining, they would throw stuff at them or do other stuff to get a reaction out of them. They stopped taking patients in 1980s, but kept the doors open as a museum until 1995. Sat there abandoned ever since until today. They are planning to turn the building into affordable housing. The renovations actually already started. The first thing they did was removing asbestos, molds, and other dangerous things. I was able to talk to the developers and designers of the project, and I am so glad to hear that they're planning to keep as much of the original building as possible, restoring what they can. But sadly, a lot of people came and vandalized the building while it was abandoned, so they have to replace certain things with replicas like the windows. It originally was able to hold 202 people, but they expanded the building and they were able to fit 460 beds in there, but the living conditions weren't great. A lot of the rooms were too small. There's a letter from the year 1910 from an inmate that describes the asylum as outrage to civilization, stating how abusive the staff has been towards patients that stay there. Reports say there was about 300 patients' deaths during the 50 years of the asylum being run. Some of the stuff that caused the deaths were from overcrowding and different experimental treatments like electric shock therapy, morphine injections, and other things. Some of the treatments the patient would have to go through you would consider torture today. A Utica crib is a coffin-like box that has latches from the outside, so they were able to restrain patients by locking them inside of this box. Another unconventional practice they used to do was pub therapy, where they used to give patients large quantities of alcohol in an attempt to sedate or calm them down. Hydrotherapy was another practice they often used. It's where they would take patients and submerge them in warm water for long periods of time, so that would last several hours to several days. But therapy wasn't the only way that people have sadly passed away. A specific incident that happened was there was a woman who was trying to escape the asylum by using her bed sheets as a way to climb down, and sadly she fell to her death. In August 1911, there was an article that was published that said 8 maniacs died in blazing asylum. The 2 upper floors and the roof of the east wing were burnt down, and the lower floor was flooded with water. After investigating, they deemed the fire to be caused by an electric wire in the storeroom on the top floor. The fire was so big, when people looked up at the mountain, they were able to see the roof just in flames. The way that a lot of these old articles talked about the manor, you can really tell that they didn't see these patients as humans. The asylum was actually specifically intended for people who struggle with addiction with alcohol. Then they started focusing on acute mental illnesses, and then it slowly snowballed to criminally insane. People would actually use the asylum to get rid of family members that they did not care for or didn't want to take care of. And that's exactly what happened to Rose Fielding. Rose ended up developing depression after all her kids started moving away from her. Her husband James was the one who admitted her into the asylum. He struggled with alcohol abuse, and he ended up moving away to the U.S. not long after. She ended up passing away, and she was buried in an unmarked grave because no one was there to visit her at any point. Rose's medical reports say that the attack only lasted a week, but then she spent the next 32 years of her life trapped in this asylum. During her stay, she ended up doing unpaid labor like everyone else based off her gender, often working in the laundry room, kitchen, or sewing room. While the men would attend to the farm, the livestock, work as butchers, blacksmiths, and other things like that. Because of these unpaid roles, they were actually able to provide food and everything else they needed for their day-to-day life without leaving the property. The patients did have regular activities such as weekly dances, sleigh rides, cricket, and curling. The staff regularly hosted music and theater shows for entertainment purposes for the patients, performing for them. Tunnels were built under the manor so staff are able to transport patients from one end of the asylum to the other, protecting them from the harsh winter on the mountain. But today, the tunnels are completely wrecked. Some parts caved in. They are also blocked off by debris. Even if you were able to get access to the tunnels, they are covered in asbestos and other toxic things. But there's a legend of ghost nurses that are hidden in the tunnels. A security guard once heard whispers behind a wooden door in the tunnels. He barged in and he saw two women in vintage nurse uniforms sitting at a table. Apparently, one of the women looked at the other one and said, "See, I told you he would find us," before vanishing into thin air in a room with no other exits. A darker legend that's around the tunnels is about 15 men seeking shelter were buried alive when the section of the tunnel collapsed, and their spirits are still trapped within the basement walls. The residents of Hamilton always found the manor very uneasy, the Gothic architecture looking down at them from the top of the hill. All the residents knew about the steam whistle. The steam whistle was a way for them to communicate a patient has escaped. At noon every day, they would test the whistle, making sure it would work. If they heard it any other time of day, parents would go and grab their children, run inside, and bolt their doors closed. Christmas Eve in the early 1920s, the whistle starts wailing. A high security risk patient had escaped from the criminally ill ward. He vanished during the staff Christmas party. A search party was put together to look all over the cliff, but they couldn't find him. They presumed he was dead, likely had fallen off the edge or slipped from snow. Weeks later, a security guard patrolling the underground tunnels heard a sound of someone humming a Christmas carol. He followed the sound to the dead-end crawl space that's located under the kitchen. The security guard had found the escaped patient. The man hadn't left the grounds. He had been living in the warmth of the tunnel pipes, stealing scraps from the kitchen for weeks. Out of curiosity, the security guard asked him why he hadn't just left. Could have just went down the mountainside to freedom. But what the patient said to the security guard really shocked him. The patient said, "I'm a monster out there, but in here, I'm just a guest." For this video, I spent hours researching the topic, and shockingly, there isn't too much documented, at least online. The asylum was turned into a museum but then closed down in 1995. The museum held a bunch of old artifacts that they used in daily life in the hospital. That includes some of the stuff that they were used to torture the patients, such as the Utica crib. The museum itself did not close, it was just relocated to St. Joseph's Healthcare Center in Hamilton, Ontario. Entry fee is by donation, with the proceeds going towards educational programs. I wish I did the research before visiting the manor because I would have loved to go and visit the museum after. I'm very thankful to be able to visit now before they start the renovations because I've always wanted to see what it looked like while it was abandoned. The tour was very rushed and there was a lot of people, so I was a bit disappointed with not getting as much opportunity to take photos, but overall I am happy with the photos I've gotten. Because of the building being boarded up and how dark it is, the lighting was so gorgeous with the little that did see through. If I had more time, I would have set up my tripod and taken long exposures, showing that the light was spilling into the rooms from the smallest holes.
Oh, yes, I did. No,
I'm also very glad that they're doing something with the building, instead of letting it rot and decay even further.